Hello everyone. I hope you can hear me well. My name is Vinny. I'm your host today for this another incredible in-event talk, right? One more episode of our talk, and today we're going to talk about the impact of climate evolution on health-related issues. We know how the climate is changing a lot. We have been talking this. We know how important is the event industry to understand the sustainability of this for the world. And today we have another incredible guest, Terence Jeyaretnam, and his partner, climate change and sustainability at EY, and reconciliation leader. Terence is an environment engineer and partner at UI in the climate change and sustainability practice, based in Melbourne. I think today he's traveling, so all over Australia and also in New Zealand. He has been working all over the Pacific. He is UI's national leader for Indigenous reconciliation, as well as the DUI leader for EY's Melbourne office. He's also the co-leader of EY's cultural diversity at EY Oceania Network. So, Terence, thank you for being here today. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you for having me, Vinny. Lovely to meet you and lovely to meet the team at in event.
That's great. So you have such a long and like a strong background that you were building in the last years, right? Um, how was for you to move in different places in all those organizations? You have been many years at EY. It's a global organization. Can you tell us a little bit more? How was your process to understand how important was this for your professional life and how you become what you are today in your role in your position.
Yeah, thank you, Vinny. So yeah, I have been doing this work for about 28 years now. So I finished as one of the first environmental engineers, graduating out of Australia back in 1993, and I've been working in the space of environment. Now, when I did environmental engineering, climate change was not a topic. So climate change became a topic. Obviously, it was starting to become a topic back then. The effects of climate change have been known for 200, but we weren't studying it. And I sort of have been very dynamic as a profession because you've had to learn along the way new things. Just in the time that I've been working, the climate has changed from something like zero point 0.7 degrees above industrial average to 1.1, 1.2 degrees above industrial average. And just in the time that I've been working, we've seen lots and lots of extreme events happening all over the world, global records being broken, and now a pandemic as well. So it's been a really sort of a roller coaster ride in a way, and I feel like there's 10 years sort of left to change the dial on climate change, and hopefully I see a good end by the time I finish up.
That's great. Okay, and we see like this consensus you mentioned, right, among scientists, how we are living this era of global heating, extreme weather events. Is there one particular cause of this? This is like a humankind affecting the environment, or there are a combination of multiple things? Is it like the human? It's the main aspect on this transition and this changing in the weather.
Yeah, so essentially, I think about 98% of scientific peer-reviewed journals conclude that it is human-induced climate change. There's no other factors contributing to it. If you think about the sort of long-term ice ages over millions of years, then there are different things that are contributing it, whether that is a volcano or whether that's sunspark or whatever that might be. But when you think about how quickly the planet's warmed over the last 50 years, it's definite consensus that it's human induced. And then if we narrow it down to why that is happening, it's around energy, fossil fuels, transportation, and agriculture and what we produce and eat. So that's really, I guess, a combination of things that are contributing. There are other things that are going into the atmosphere, but they're the main things that are contributing to climate change.
Got it. You mentioned agriculture and field-based economy. In the agriculture, do you think we need a strong shift on the? We are very meat-based, right? Like agriculture, we have a strong producing of meat in the world. We are talking a lot about like a plant-based food. Do you think this has to be a strong shift on this way, or people like we know how people behavior takes time to change, so how do you see this those sectors understanding and changing and shifting to the right direction?
Yeah, it's interesting, Vinny, that the food systems is one of the things that is the last that's being talked about. Primary focus has been on fossil fuels. Now the transition and the gas transition's underway. The thing that everyone's avoiding talking about, and this is in the EU, it's in Australia, it's in the US, is the meat-based and the industrial agricultural system that we have. And that is the next massive transition that needs to occur if we're to keep temperature warming below 2 degrees by 2050. I mean, 1.5 degrees is sort of looking very late at the moment. So we're talking 2 degrees. So the food we eat is responsible for over one quarter of the global greenhouse gas emissions. So 80% are linked to livestock production. But then you also look at water. It takes 100 to 200 times more water to raise a pound of beef than does to raise a pound of plant food. So 100 to 200 times. Even if you think about um, uh, chicken and beef, chicken has 10 times less emissions than beef, but plant based has 100 times less emissions than beef. It's a massive difference. And then you think about the amount of land that's being used and the soil impact that we're having. Um, Meat and dairy only produces 18% of our calories and 37% of our protein in the world, but it uses about 83% of farmland uh, around the world. If you release all the farmland that's used for meat production and dairy production, it's a continent of Africa that you release around the world.
Wow. Wow, that's that's a huge impact. And how is it for yourself, for your family? Are you very strong like a plant-based food culture? Like did you change your behavior already? How is it for you? Was it
Absolutely.
easy?
Absolutely. Look, I was vegetarian for a while, and then I started eating a bit of meat and fish. But now myself and my wife are both completely plant-based, and we try and be less processed, more in the plant-based. We've got three kids that they only have some fish and prawns. They don't eat meat anymore. They themselves chose to do that. And so we're very much a plant-based family. And I can tell you that I spend a lot of time with physical activity. I do a lot of exercise. I teach karate, and the kids do karate. A vegan or a plant-based lifestyle has no impact on your physical ability at all. I can still bench press the same as what I used to be able to bench press when I was young. So I
That's
can
great.
definitely recommend it. And you get sick a lot less.
That's great. Yeah, I think what you eat it is so important for like your health. It's definitely a strong aspect of health. It's what you are eating, right? Like, and we are seeing now how that impacts the whole environment, not only our health but our world, our society, right?
Absolutely. The COP meeting that just finished last year said that people in developed countries need to reduce meat consumption by 80% in order to meet our 2050 climate goals.
Wow,
So everyone starts to think about becoming like me.
that's good. You're a role model.
Hope
Yeah,
so.
yeah. You should. We should do more interviews like that or post more content about this. That's great. And regarding the fossil fuel economy, we are very strong now on change it to electric vehicles and etc. But electrical vehicles, they are still not completely uh, clean, right? They all the process to get the electric into the vehicle, even to build the vehicle, there is still a lot of process that impacts the environment. And how do you see this moving forward? Do you believe the industry will be like a carbon net zero emission? And how exactly we can measure this, right? Like, what are the companies that are effectively taking care of the environment and they are like reducing the carbon emission?
Yeah, so I think just on the transportation, transportation is going to be one of the quickest transition industries. So that the prediction by those in the sector and those who research the sector is that by 2030, all developed countries should be mostly electric in terms of transportation. Electric car, I'll have an electric car, and that's the way things are going to move. The good thing about electric cars, Vinny, is that they're not just consuming, not just off fossil fuels. They can be powered by renewable energy, uh, but there are two other advantages. One is that they can act as a battery storage for the home. And I think that with the two-way chargers that are coming into production, we're going to see electric cars being used as additional storage capacity at home. And the third thing is that they're going to require a lot less service. So the parts are going to last longer, and the cars themselves are going to last longer. So studies have been done around the life cycle analysis of fossil fuel cars and electric cars, looking at their total life and the emissions around that, and definitely concluded that electric vehicles are far superior than fossil fuel vehicles for those three reasons.
That's great. Yeah, I think when you we increase the life cycle of any product, it's better. And of course, then we needed to understand how we can reuse or recycle all those products. But definitely, the industry, the it's become way more efficient, right? The efficiency of those vehicles will be very important. But at the same time, we know how emissions coming from airplane, it's way more than like just a regular commercial vehicle, right? So is another industry that we needed to have a huge impact is steel, right? We have a long journey ahead to change.
Absolutely, and I think I'll be putting air travel in the same area as industrial meat, and they're going to be the hard to abate sectors. There is work being done around biofuels and electric planes and so on, and the large motor companies like Rolls Royce. I've got a friend who works there. He told me that they're doing a lot of research around meeting the 2050 goals, but again, it's going to be a hard to abate sector.
Nice. Yeah. It's a big challenge. Like we needed to be aware of those. We are in the events industry, and events you always have people traveling, right? Either even inside the country or internationally, you are always like traveling when it comes to events. And we needed to reduce this impact. I think. How do you see the impact of COVID? What was the positive impact of COVID in our society? Like, of course, we had such a tremendous negative impact, and all the lives that was lost, all the problems that we seen. And if we recognize like many like the group of people more vulnerable was because also past issues with their health, right? And that comes again from what we are eating,
What are you
what
eating?
we
Yeah.
are, yeah. So the food that we are eating, that impacts a lot in our health. So first, so how do you see the positive impact of COVID in the world?
Yeah. Let me start with, I'll come back to the positive impact, but let me start with, I guess, infectious diseases. Three out of every four emerging infectious diseases in humans originate from animals. And in part, it's caused by animal agriculture and our reliance on it. Whether you look at AIDS or avian flu, swine flu, SARS, MERS, Ebola, Zika, COVID-19, they've all come from animals, and all of the older infectious diseases that you and I have been vaccinated for, like chickenpox and measles, they all came from animals. So this whole thing of viruses that are in animals coming into humans is a massive problem, and the continuation of reliance on um, meat-based agricultural ecosystems are going to continue to produce these viruses. The other part to this is that with the ice melting, there are things like animal carcasses, other plant-based viruses that are starting to emerge into the world. There was a case of anthrax in Canada where one person died and a whole bunch of people got anthrax from a rotting carcass that came out of ice being melted. So that's the other issue with climate change and our sort of industrial agricultural ecosystem. The the sort of if we then come back to, well, if we transition to a food-based, plant-based system instead of a meat-based system, there was a study that was done by, and it was published in the British Medical Journal last year, that looked at 2,800 frontline medical workers from 6 countries: France, Germany, Italy, Spain, UK, and the USA, looked at COVID-19 exposure, and they narrowed it down to 568 cases. Um, and what they found was that people who were on a plant diet were 73% less likely to get mild to severe COVID symptoms. So people who were on a plant-based diet basically were less symptomatic and recovered better from COVID. And I can tell you that from my own experience, I was still exercising mildly. 4 days later, I was completely fine, back to normal level of exercising with my COVID. Now, I did have the vaccination, but uh, plant-based. That there've been 2 studies now. That's one of them. Um, so coming back to positive impacts of COVID, I think COVID's definitely accelerated um, technology and the use of technology. And if you look at this equation around impact, it's a scientific equation for impact, which is impact equals population times affluence times technology. Population keeps going up, affluence around the world keeps going up. The only thing that can bring down impact is technology. And so technology such as in event and all the other platforms that we have that reduce travel, improve efficiency, and therefore reduce the emissions associated with what we need to do day to day, are one of the ways in which we're going to be able to bring down emissions. And hopefully, through technology, we can talk to lots of people about changing their diets and living a much more planet-friendly lifestyle. That's another way technology can help get to a much wider audience.
That's true. Yeah, that's perfect. Uh, so yeah, we have a lot of to learn, right, in this process of changing our behavior to understand that we are part of this ecosystem. So I would like you to ask you more. We have a question here from our audience about what does the climate change mean for sustainability? We can only have like a real sustainable culture, a real sustainable environment when we fix this problem with climate change. So what exactly does it mean?
Um, what does climate change mean for sustainability? So sustainability, I define as being much broader. So we have climate impacts, but also biodiversity impacts, plastic in the ocean. There's waste. There's a range of, and we're breaching a lot of other barriers like the nitrogen barrier and the phosphorus barrier, in terms of what we sort of um, put into the land to cultivate the land, right? And most of the cultivation, by the way, happens for animal feed. So just so that people are aware that this is not mostly plant based. It's animal feed that's being produced. The One of the things that the UN did last year, and I think it was finally concluded this year, is that UN declared clean environment as a human right. So the UN is now saying that um, human rights is not just not having torture and having food and water and sanitation, but also a clean environment. And so I think we've got to start working towards a much broader set of sustainable development goals. That means that sustainability alongside climate change gets resolved. One thing that a lot of people don't talk about, as an example, is oceans. So oceans, people forget that oceans have been absorbing a lot of the carbon so far.
Yeah.
So oceans have become quite acidic. You would have heard about corals bleaching. You would have heard about sea levels rising. So that ocean becoming acidic and us fishing a lot of the fish out of the ocean means that oceans are starting to suffer as a consequence of human domination. And people forget that every second breath that we take is made by the ocean. So if the oceans die, humans die as well. And so when we think about broader sustainability, and oceans consume a large part of the world, uh, we have a lot of challenges ahead.
Yes, that's very important. I think first of all, to understand more how the things were made, right? Like we pretty much today we think, oh, I was birthed, and then I have air, I have oxygen to breathe, and the oxygen it's available for everyone, and it's like something that we don't need to care about this the quality of the air, or the quality of the ocean. It's something that many
Yeah.
times we don't think a lot. And first we needed to learn more about this. I got to watch this documentary called One Strange Rock. I don't know if you
Hmm.
heard about.
No.
It's a very good documentary. It's a very nice narrative about how our world, so they call the Earth, right? Like this strange rock, was able to grow life, right? How this planet was able to have a perfect environment to grow life here. And when you see all the crazy things and all the things that happen across millions, billions of years to be alive today, we definitely should be way more care. We should care way more about our acts, our impact on everything we are doing, and of course, there is a huge impact on the large organizations. So, how do you see your purpose, your mission at UI as a professional, in your personal mission? Uh, Being in a big organization that works with other big organizations, how do you see your impact, and what motivates you to change the things?
Yeah, no, thank you for that documentary. I'll have to look it up. The other documentary that I recently watched was narrated by Kate Winslet, and it's called "Eating Our Way to Extinction." That's free on YouTube, so that's worth watching. I think we forget that we are part of the environment. I think people talk about the environment being out there somewhere, and don't really sort of realize that we're part of the environment. We are born into the environment, we breathe and we live in the environment, and we die and we become part of the environment. And people should not separate the two. And so coming back to sort of your question about working for a large organization, how do we see our mission? So EY is a great place to work because EY has become carbon neutral globally, and has set a 2025 net zero goal. So I feel like my values are aligned with the organization that I work in and the 300,000 people that work here. But part of EY's sort of 5 areas of growth, one of it is environment, social, and governance for the whole organization, not just our practice. So we see our role in transforming large companies as one of the keys, um, going forward for EY. So very much looking forward to working with other large companies in helping them transition.
Yeah, that's amazing. Great. We are approaching almost the end, I think. I have another question here from our audience that says, what methods do countries use to estimate how climate may affect health conditions? So, is there any particular way to measure this, or is something that is still developing?
Yeah, so there's been a few different studies on this. One of the studies that was done in the United States estimated that the health cost of climate change exceeds now 820 billion a year. Now, that's not million, it's 820 billion a year.
Yeah.
And the health costs include public health costs and all the lifestyle diseases that we have to treat as a result of the way we eat, but also all of the sort of medical and physical costs of disasters, climate illnesses, respiratory illnesses. Half of Australia had an impact from the bushfires. Not just one part of Australia. Half of Australia was somehow impacted by the bushfires, whether it was air quality or whether it was infrastructure going down. So the costs continue to rise, and insurance won't be able to fix that because insurance companies are there to fix, certain events, not events like what we're having globally. And so what we're going to find is that insurance will be starting to say we're not going to insure certain things, and that's when the real costs are going to hit. The final thing I'd
Or
probably
they
mention,
will charge way more, right? They're gonna the insurance companies, they are charging more and more and more.
they are charging. So some of the areas that we've had floods after floods in Australia, the insurance cost on a $500,000 home is about 15,000 per year. It's you can't insure it; becomes uninsurable, and therefore the property prices come down. So it has an impact on the property prices. So the other thing I'd mention, which is another study that came out of Columbia University, is that nearly so the emissions produced by 3 Americans kill one person. Right. So essentially looked at again climate and health, and basically concluded that 3 Americans produce enough carbon emissions to kill one person. There are these sort of studies emerging, and linking closely the costs that are escalating from climate and health, um, and how to start to think about addressing that in a holistic sense, because emissions used to be, well, we need to pay for emissions reduction, but when you start to include the total cost, it becomes very obvious. The last thing I'll leave you with is that there was a global study done to say, well, how much is it going to cost to globally become renewable? Just looking at the renewables sector. And it was some large figure in trillions of dollars. But the takeaway was that it could be paid back in 7 years. So we could be completely renewable globally and pay ourselves back in 7 years.
Yeah, that's a light in the end of the tunnel, right? I think we should look for those good aspects that it's still able to change the things. It's still able to change our behavior and impact positive people's life. We see, and this number that you share, like this research, I see here in the country, right? Like I live in the U.S. I see how such a like bad non-sustainable behavior impact a lot people in our country, especially the most poor people, right? Those are the
Yeah,
ones that suffer most, and of course that impacts the whole world. We see
absolutely.
people, the poverty, they always like get the worst aspect of food, even the trash, right? They today countries, they send their trash to other countries because they cannot recycle everything. They cannot um, deal with all the garbage were created like here. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
of course, I think it's a talk for a
Wes,
new
you
like episode. But
for another time. Yeah.
yeah, I would like you to give you like a your final message about how we can start to change individually and change our organizations. Right? Is there any particular book that you recommend, or any particular like a message that you have in your mind, like that set your mind to do the right things on your daily life?
Yeah, so there's lots and lots of things. I'd recommend that particular documentary. There's lots on Netflix as well that are worth watching from both the plant-based lifestyles, game changers, and there's a bunch of documentaries around environment. The one thing I was going to highlight, when you talk about vulnerable communities, you'll know about Black Lives Matter in the US. One of the three ladies who founded Black Lives Matter is from Africa, and the reason why she started at Black Lives Matter is not because of police brutality, but because of the impact of climate change on Black lives all around the world. And Black lives mostly live around the equator, including Africa. So that's a little trivia. But in terms of sort of five simple things to do, I would definitely say electrify your home and your transport, because that's going to be not just better for the planet, but it's going to be better for your wallet, because these things are going to be paid off within a few years, and then you've got free energy. Reduce meat consumption, which we've talked a little bit about. So meat, fish, dairy, and that will not only reduce the emissions but also improve your health and make you much more resilient to COVID. Buy less, buy secondhand. There's nothing wrong with looking at buying less and buying secondhand things, and then carefully recycle your waste and catch public transport and walk. Walking's good for you, and bicycle. So they're the things that I would recommend. Get back to being one with nature.
That's perfect. Thank you a lot, Terence. Thank you for your time. I really appreciated this conversation here, our talk. I hope to have an opportunity to meet you in person someday when we reduce the air impact, like the air transportation impact in our climate, and maybe there in Australia or here in the US in New York. Thank you so much.
Lovely. It's been great to be chatting with you, Vinny. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. See you in the next in event talk. Bye bye.